So my name is Vincent Wotton. I recently got married and I grew up in Crawley. My position at Crawley LGBT CIC is the events manager. Part of my role is community engagement. And my favourite thing about Crawley and Crawley Pride, as a town, we're a multicultural town. So I really hope, and my passion kind of comes from this, that moving forward, Crawley Pride continues that multicultural essence and that there's kind of a bridge built between all the different communities and that we can live cohesively. When I was leaving secondary school into sixth form, my best friend at the time actually said, if you come out as bi or gay, I would never talk to you again. And that was quite hard hitting for me because I didn't really understand what that meant. I was quite naive at the time. I didn't really have any kind of gender thoughts or sexuality thoughts. And then I went to sixth form and it kind of flooded in, and then I understood what he meant. I then come out as gay, and to this day he's never spoken to me. I have seen him in the streets, but he kind of walks away. But I think the funny part of the story is he's now married to a man. So I think sometimes it's to understand that if you are being bullied or there's a situation that it's not always about you, and sometimes it's about that other person. So knowing the context of the hate crime or the bully is really important. Crawley LGBT has strong connections to lots of different community groups. The police, for example, they are at the forefront of our minds at the moment. We're working with them to promote a positive relationship between the LGBT community, specifically in Crawley, and the police. It's been recognised that there hasn't necessarily been a great relationship between the two. For example, there was a situation where a hate crime was reported and it wasn't necessarily followed up. And because of that, and because it has happened quite a lot, the trust in the community to report and then it being followed up by the police is just not there. And therefore, things don't get reported anymore. So we're working hard, and they have been an absolute gem in creating that kind of bridge to us as a community organisation. Other organisations that we're working with at the moment are West Sussex Fostering, South East Adoption. We are just about to host a family event, which is a Pathways to Family specifically for the LGBT community. And it's those organisations that we really need to be able to connect with on a wider scale to make sure that the community is heard. Gatwick Airport have been brilliant. They're such a fun organisation. They've got their Gatwick Pride community. They were heavily involved in 2023's Pride. They kind of have a sub-community that we were dealing with. We also hosted a roadshow in 2023, and they were heavily involved in that as well. As an organisation, they did sponsor, they were a headline sponsor, but they are wonderful mentors and a further outreach for us to communicate with as well. If I was speaking to myself 100 years from now, I would like to tell myself that be active and be present in the moment. Growing up in Crawley, I wasn't really sure of who I was. Maybe naive, I don't know, but it was never a thought process of mine. It was only when I had come out at 17 that I had started to understand my history, started to understand the culture, specifically within Crawley. I was researching, but if I hadn't have done all of that, I wouldn't know about the history of LGBT. I wouldn't know the current climate of Crawley LGBT or LGBT as a whole. And I think it's really important to understand that. And if you don't understand that, how can you be present in your moment and kind of live your truth? If I was talking to myself 100 years from now, live your truth. Be who you are, no matter of the questions that you get asked, no matter of the harassment you may get on the street. Live your truth. It might not be someone that's overly flamboyant and that stereotype. It might not be what society want you to be, for me as a gay man, but live your truth for who you are.
I realised I was trans probably only about 3 years ago. 3 to 4 years ago now. I suppose it was a slow dawning over a long period of time. I mean, if I go way back in my life, I remember sneaking into my mum's room to put on her clothes. And I suppose that is probably the point at which I should have realised. A lot of people get body dysphoria, and that is not necessarily a sign that, or not always the only sign that you're trans. Sometimes the sign that you're trans is from the euphoria of looking different, putting on that dress and makeup and heels for the first time and looking in the mirror and really, feeling happy about how I looked. Is the difference. A lot of people think that you have to really hate yourself to realise that you're trans. And maybe that's why I didn't realise that I was, because I didn't hate myself, but I didn't like myself either. And it was seeing the other side of it that made me realise, that I wasn't who I wanted to be. It just never felt right. I always explain it to people like, everybody's probably been to a function at some point where they've had to wear a piece of clothing that is tight and feels uncomfortable to wear, but you've only got to do it for that night, a couple of hours while you're in the interview, the fancy function, whatever it is. But that's how I felt all the time. Like, I had this clothing on that I couldn't take off. But it just felt uncomfortable. But it wasn't huge dislike for myself. First time I went out in public wearing girls' clothing, if you can call it that, clothing, was terrifying. It felt right, but I felt like everybody was staring at me, even though there was nobody around. I first decided to do it, I did it for work. So I got up one morning and I just put on female clothing and went to work with no warning to my colleagues. They knew that I was questioning my gender, but they didn't know that I was going to come in looking very different. And it was just really scary, especially when I'm in a customer-facing job, to know that I wasn't just going to see, 5 or 6 people that I worked with. I was probably going to see 100 or more people in that day. So it was quite a lot of exposure in a very short period of time. But I think that helped me massively be comfortable with it. Everyone around me was just so supportive. And the girls at work, they never, they never hesitated for a second, and they always went out of their way to compliment whatever I was wearing or my makeup or something. They always found something positive to say to me, which was, really, really amazing. So I suppose I do take a bit of the responsibility on myself because only I know what I'm thinking and what I'm feeling. It's not, anybody else's place to be able to identify that for me. Or push it upon me, because it's not how we're meant to be. But the things that would have helped me growing up is if I'd actually had some role models sort of to base myself on. That when I grew up, gay was barely even a thing, let alone being trans. And I think, having somebody to look up to would have made a huge difference. It would have made me realise that, it's okay to be whoever I wanted to be. You know, it did take me a long time. And then I suppose, you know, at the point that I even realised, the thought of coming out to everybody was terrifying. The best thing about being in the community, the LGBT community, is everybody is just so accepting and understanding and loving. You know, I think, again, going back to before, when you asked me what would I say to my younger self, another thing I would say is there's so many people out there, they're just waiting to embrace you and to show you that it's okay to be who you are, to be proud of that, and that you're safe and you're loved. So what I'd like to say more to the NHS than any of the other public services is, you know, I understand the struggles that they face. Part of my job role is working in that sort of environment, but trans healthcare is just awful. You know, I got on the waiting list 2.5 years ago and I still haven't had a first appointment. I'm looking at least another 2.5 years before they'll even see me. And the people that are getting on it now, with the exponential growth of the trans community, they're looking at 7-10 years down the line before they even get a first appointment, and it's just unfair. You know, it's not a choice. It's who we are, and a lot of people need help with that. I'm quite happy to put myself out there and be a role model, but other people don't feel the same way. With the financial burden for the rest of my life, we're talking, it's not going to be forever. There is an end in sight, but I can't see the end because the NHS haven't taken me on. As soon as they take me on, that's when the cost will stop, because the care will transfer over completely. You know, and should they not get to me fast enough and I would consider having any sort of surgery privately, the cost goes up very significantly. So I know people who have remortgaged houses to pay for the surgery that them or their child needs, just to be able to live a happy life. So the hopes I have for the future of the LGBT community is that everybody's just accepting of who everybody wants to be, and that there's no prejudice put upon people. Although it's not quite as prevalent as it used to be, it's still there. And yeah, at times it can be daunting that I have to think about where it is I go and who's likely to be there, what sort of, you know, what sort of groups of people might be there, because, you know, I don't want to have any sort of abuse. So a world where everybody is just accepting of everyone, that's the future I want to see. I would tell myself, my younger self, that it's okay to be whoever you want to, embrace it and just live your life. There's no point in waiting, because it doesn't change. There's no point in pretending that you're not, because you are. Just, be happy, love yourself.
I'm Gillian Bailo. I'm a Methodist minister, and I came to Crawley about, 2.5 years ago. What I tell my younger self was, be sure of who you are and don't be ashamed of it. I spent so many years not understanding what I was feeling about myself, and probably from about the age of 7. I knew I was different because when we talked together, me and my friends or classmates, the answers that I was giving really weren't normal ones, in inverted commas. So I couldn't see anything wrong with when somebody said, how many children are you going to have? I think I was about 7. I said, I'd quite like about 10. And they said, well, who are you going to marry then? Well, I don't know, but I don't want to marry a man. So it would be a woman. And they said, well, you can't do that. How can you have children that way? And I realised I wouldn't be saying that again. And then there were things that I wouldn't say. And then there were just not really connecting with some of the things that my friends liked to do. And I didn't want to do those things. I wanted to talk and to discuss and to wrestle with ideas. But the girls I was with didn't want to do that. And so I enjoyed much more the company of some of the boys that were wanting to explore and to think about where our world came from and where it was going. And I just felt so different. And then the teasing started, and I didn't know what they were talking about. I had no idea why they were laughing in the bike sheds. I didn't understand the words they were using about me. I didn't understand that what looked to me like being friends with people looked something different to them. And I had no idea. I didn't even know what being gay was then. And it took a long time to even actually understand what that was. I was a young adult with a husband by the time I understood a little bit more about what it might mean to be gay. And that was perhaps a year, I think, when 2 men happened to move into a house behind somebody else, and it was all in the news. And all I could think was, if these 2 people love each other, that's all that matters. Nothing else matters. Why are we making such a fuss about 2 people choosing to live together as a couple in a house? And that didn't go down very well either, really, that view that I had. And I still didn't understand, and it wasn't really until my own children had friends that were gay, and I started to meet more people from the LGBT community, that I did start to understand, and everything seemed normal. And those people were people I really related to really easily, and that was great. But I was a Christian. And I knew my faith was really, really important to me. But I also started to realise that all these things I hadn't understood were parts of who I was. And I didn't know what to do with that, because I thought I had to be one or the other. I could be Christian, or I could be gay. But how could I possibly be both? I was in training to be a minister by that time. And that was hard to come to terms with. But there were people there that I was training with that were able to talk to me and say, yeah, but it is okay. There were lots of others of us in this area that are training or that are ministers that are also part of the LGBT community. Why do you think it's any different? And I remembered that phrase that I had, that love is all that's important. And if I believe in a God of love, then I have to put that together in my own life for other people, which is easy, but also for myself. And so that's when I actually came out, all those years from being about 7 and realising I wasn't quite what somebody else was, to being an adult with children around. And there was quite a lot of difficult times around that time, but also really good times to come into the place where I am now, where I have finally had a church blessing of my marriage to my wife a couple of years ago, 10 years after our partnership. And so many people there, friends and family, and if they weren't there, they sent cards. And that is wonderful. And to come here to be completely open and out, everybody knows who we are. And coming into Crawley, people have been really affirming, and the area, the other churches that I support, they've been welcoming and caring. And it's just a joy to be here. And I look forward to the next years that I've got ahead of me here before I move to somewhere else. But I am very thankful for the Crawley community and for now feeling part of it myself. What I would say to them would be, you can be reassured, because as a person of faith, I believe that God is a God of love, and God loves you just as you are. God doesn't expect you to put on any, I don't know, a mask or a cape or anything. You can just be who you are. If you're a person that is part of the LGBTQIAA++ whatever community, you are welcome here too. We love you already, and you are so special. Please don't try to be anybody else. Just flourish and grow and flower just as you are. I think for other groups around, I think what I would say is please be as open as you possibly can. If you're affirming of the LGBT community, please show it. Use up-to-date pride flags. Put things there to say how welcoming you are. The churches I've got who are offering marriages of any two persons, make sure anybody can see that it's on your website, on your Facebook page, on your notice boards outside. Please make it clear that we are welcome, because we're a community that needs that affirmation. We need to feel safe, and we desperately want to feel welcomed. I'm delighted when I see pride flags on anything, and the police do a good job, the hospitals do a good job. I know the schools are working hard at what they're doing with the young people of our communities, and that's wonderful to know that that's coming through. It helps us all to understand each other so much better and makes everybody's lives more comfortable and more hopeful.
Hi, I'm Derek Farrell. I'm a Crawley resident and a crime writer, and I've been living here for over 25 years. My partner at the time and I were civil partnered. We were living in Crawley at the time, and one of the things that had really inspired us to live in Crawley was the countryside around it. It's just breathtaking, and we had decided we really wanted something, for me, very English country, very pastoral. Gay weddings, as they were called then, were really, really new. But by that stage, I was out and proud, and I was like, I'm not sanitizing this, I'm not censoring this for people. We did the full works. We did proper embossed invitations. They went to everybody in our close. They went to all the people we knew, went to people at work, they went to people that we'd met through book clubs and so on. Only one person declined to come to the wedding. Other people came, children came, the sun shone, it was the best day of my life. And then 8 years ago, my mother died, which was probably the worst day of my life. But we had already arranged that 2 weeks later we were converting our civil partnership into full marriage. And it had to happen because otherwise, well, you know what it's like if you miss an official engagement, you don't get another appointment for 2 years. So I was still shell-shocked from my mother's death. And friends we'd met through the gym, people I'd met through writing groups, turned up. They came, they didn't need to, all we needed was the two of us and a witness. But people came, they dressed up, they made this an event. People who hadn't been at our wedding because we hadn't met them at that stage, made this an event to celebrate the two of us and life. And that made me really emotional, still makes me emotional, but that was how community rallied round and told me I was loved and respected and wanted in this place. I've been to Crawley Pride a couple of times. Originally in the park where the march gathers and the parade moves off from, and then a couple of years ago I went to the actual festival in the park, which was lovely. It's really just hard not to get emotional again when you think of how far we've come, that there were families, there were LGBT people and non-LGBT people there. It was a really great day. There were some really good acts. It was fun and it was celebratory. And I think there's a lot to be said for celebrating who we are and where we are, and also seeing that strength in the number of people. My husband at the time said to me, I'm prone sometimes to think that the worst will happen. And my husband always points to days like that and says, but we're not alone anymore. And that's what I got from Crawley Pride that day. If I had a message for the LGBTQ plus community in Crawley, and particularly younger people, this is where I start to sound like a really old man, but I think there are three elements to it. My message would be, number one, stick together. We're in a world that is infinitely better than it used to be. But there are still so many threats, so many people who would quite happily see many of us eradicated from the planet. And that's not being over dramatic. I think it's very easy for those people to split us up, to make, particularly when people start talking about and mocking all of the letters in the LGBTQIA plus acronym. Bring them all in is what I say. Stick together, because if they come for one of us, they're going to come for all of us eventually. And that's something that we're seeing a lot at the moment. So number one, stick together. Number two, remain vigilant. Things are, as I say, infinitely better than they used to be, but it doesn't take long for things to slide backwards. So tactically vote against those people who are actively trying to hurt you. Make your voices heard when newspapers, TV, media belittle or denigrate anybody from your community. Make it clear that you will not stand for that anymore. Don't allow that gradual erosion of rights. Remain vigilant. At the same time, don't be paranoid. This is a great world. This is a great country. There are millions of people in this country who either don't give a monkeys about us, which is fine, or actively support us and are allies to us. So celebrate that. Celebrate it. Go out, be yourself, live the best life that you can, and just don't let anybody put you back in the boxes that some of us have come out of. If I was to give a message to my younger self, it would be, you're better than you think you are. I grew up at a time when every message, consciously and subconsciously, was that people like me weren't right and would never have happiness or the happiness that I've got today. And I'm very, very lucky to have lived long enough to show that that was untrue. So yeah, I would tell my younger self, A, you're better than you think you are, and B, hold on. I think if we look at public services in Crawley, it's pretty common, not just in Crawley, but I think across the whole country, which is when they do a good job, they do a really good job. But when they lose focus on the specific needs of the community, things can very quickly go disastrously wrong. My comment to those public services would be to try always to remember that whilst there is a huge amount of commonality between the LGBTQI population and the general population, there are very often specific needs, and it never hurts to ask, to remain open, to just say things like, what pronouns do you want to use? And to ask, when someone's in hospital, who do you want admitted, who do you not want admitted? There will be very basic, straightforward questions that can really make life more comfortable for people in this community. And that's all I would say, is remain open and ask questions, and don't just assume that you understand how people in this community live or feel.
So yeah, I love going to Bar 7, the nightclub as well. It's one of my favourite nightclubs to go to, and everyone there's so friendly. And it's like when you also go on that field, you can talk to anybody and everyone's almost like your friend, and that's what's good. There's no nastiness or horrible people at Crawley Pride. And I just love it. I think it's fantastic. Basically, maybe that, just so you know in the future, this is what might happen. You're never on your own. Don't feel isolated ever. Even if you're bullied now, you'll grow up to be a lot stronger than you did maybe when you were at school. Just be yourself, 100%. Be authentically you, which I am anyway. So that's all I would really say. I can't really think of anything else to say. There you go.